So we're asked to graph some trig functions here. We have a cosine graph, and then below it we have a secant graph. So we'll do these two, and then we'll be done for this video. Okay, the amplitude comes from the number in front of cosine, which is nothing, so it's got a 1. The period. So the period for cosine is 2 pi divided by this. So let's do our calculations real quick. 2 pi divided by pi over 3. So when we divide by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So pi over 3, we multiply by 3 over pi. And your pi's cancel out. So this thing has a period of 6. Now our graph, unfortunately, is labeled with pi's and 2 pi's and 3 pi's. So pi is 3.14, so right here would be approximately where 3 is. 2 pi is 6 point something, so this is approximately where 6 is. It would be really nice. In fact, let's just do this. I'm going to call this one 3, and I'm going to call this one 6, and I'm going to call that one 9. But if you're not allowed to erase and put in your own, then you're just going to have to deal with knowing that 6 is less than 2 pi. And a phase, it has no phase shift and it has no vertical shift at all. The phase shift would be here after x, and the vertical shift would be wholly at the end of everything. So it has a value of 1, so we should know that cosine starts at a max and ends at a max. So maximum value is 1, and it has a minimum halfway in between. So that's going to be right here, in fact, where I'd already colored that out. Which means our zeros are there and there, and this is going to be 9, so it's going to be back down here again. Okay, so then we connect all these dots in a nice smooth manner. And that is the graph of cosine of pi over 3x. Okay, so if you're able to change the labels or label it yourself, then these graphs are much nicer to look at than if they give you something and you have to deal with what they've given you. But sometimes that happens. Okay, the next one, 2 secants. So I'm going to start by sketching the points from its cousin to cosine of 1/4 x. So the amplitude is going to be 2. The period, once again, period is 2 pi over 1/4. So we multiply by the reciprocal, 2 pi times 4 over 1. So this has a period of 8 pi. Oh good, look, 8 pi's on there. So period of 8 pi. It has no phase shifts and no vertical shifts. So pretty straightforward. So here's your midline. Cosine, it looks like starts at 2, so here's the cosine at 2. And it ends at its maximum, so here's 8 pi, it's going to end at the 2. Okay, so maximum at the beginning, maximum at the end. Halfway is where it has a minimum. So that looks like -2 right there. In between a max and a min is a 0, so the zeros are at 2 pi and 6 pi. Probably over here at -2 pi as well. So from those points, now we graph our secant. Everywhere cosine has a 0 or intersects your midline, the secant has an asymptote. So at all these places where cosine crosses the x-axis, secant is going to have an asymptote. So to actually sketch the graph, wherever cosine has a maximum, we're going to draw a parabola looking thing. Okay, a little bit wider than normal because it has a very wide period. So sketch them all, trying to stay in between your asymptotes as much as possible. And this one's going to come over here like that. And it's going to continue on and on and on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.